All right, seeing it's 3 o'clock. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Zane.
Here.
Commissioner Flynn.
Here.
Chairman Payton.
Here.
Commissioner Ross Sikowicz.
Here.
Commissioner Willie Wongolo.
Here.
Purpose for the following special meeting was to clarify the previous motion by Commissioner Zane at the last meeting relative to the level sign report. What was printed and what was I was thinking is totally different than so if there's any discussion.
May I speak? I did read in the newspaper that I seconded the motion to not to allow the press to come to our meeting. Quite frankly, I was not seconding that motion. I was seconding the motion Commissioner Flynn put on the floor initially that we should put this whole thing on hold until we have all studied it. So as far as I'm concerned, I thought that motion was going to start from that point on. That was my motion that I seconded. And before I finish, I want to just acknowledge what Commissioner Zane may have said. From what I understand, he was kind of venting what his displeasure at the way the lower sum reporter may have treated the tenant. In as much as I didn't like the way the tenant was treated, there is no reason for me to vote to not to have the press at our meeting because I have no business keeping them away. So I did not second that motion, just to be clear.
You know, in fairness, I made an original motion, and I think it got a second. I don't know what it got a second. We had really like 3 motions going at the same time where I asked for sort of a continuance, if you remember. So maybe we got a little bit confused as to wording, but I really don't know. I don't know whether I seconded or who seconded it, but that be it. I'm not really sure who seconded what.
For clarity, can we actually have the motion read? Again, the motion that was ultimately passed and accepted by the Board of Commissioners.
Do we have a copy of the motion? Okay. To clarify for Commissioner Ross Sikowicz, a motion was made by Mr. Zane and seconded by Ms. Willie Bongolo that the LHA consider whether it would be appropriate to draft a letter to the Lowell Sun reporter indicating his behavior in this particular instance was unacceptable and irresponsible and did in fact interfere with several residents' quiet enjoyment of their premises and as such would not be tolerated. If such behavior continued in the future, it could result in the LHA requesting he not be allowed on the premises without permission from the authority.
So what happened with the first motion that was on the floor? Because that was what I was seconding for. The first motion. Because when you started calling the roll, I understood that the first motion was still on the floor. That is for us to go back and study this. Because quite frankly, I've tried to look through this. There are so many questions I have. And so I supported him for suggesting that we put the discussion on hold. And correct me if I'm wrong. Commissioner Zane comments probably he was trying to explain to people that he didn't like the way everything went. And if in the future, if that continues, maybe we should consider not having them come to, interview people. But that was a suggestion from what I understood. It was not like emotion, except if I'm wrong, but I didn't understand it as emotion. So correct me if I'm wrong, was that emotion? If it was, then that certainly was not what I seconded for.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't think there was much confusion. I thought Mr. Flynn's motion did not pass. We had further discussion. I did talk about some things, specifically our duties as landlords, the obligation we owe to tenants under the law. I also said, if you recall, similar to if we had a situation where there was a nuisance on the premises, such as drug dealing, or if there was, I used the example that if I lived next to you and my son was in the band and practicing all hours of the night, keeping you awake, that you, if you reported that to the landlord would have an obligation to take some steps to talk to me and say, you're disturbing your next door neighbors, and we owe her a duty, a covenant of quiet enjoyment, which is inherent in all tenancies, whether it be on the Lowell Housing Authority, whether it be on a privately held landlord-tenant relationship. I think from the facts that we have in the package that was presented to us, okay, clearly the residents were upset, okay? The information that was later printed in the Lowell Sun was then contradicted by an email from the Assistant City Manager, Mr. Backey, to the Lowell Sun reporter, saying what you said was not accurate, or what you attributed to me was not accurate. Ironically, the statements that Mr. Backey said were not accurate were the same types of statements, or to the same degree, that got the tenants upset. So there was evidence to me that the reporter upset the tenants. And again, clearly, we cannot say we ban a reporter from these meetings, they're open to the public, or we ban a reporter from the premises, or we ban anybody without going through proper procedure. As the newspaper noted, I am an attorney, and I clearly know that there's due process in these things. We do have procedures and policies set up. Perhaps we could refer those policies to a public safety subcommittee or some subcommittee to look at them, to reevaluate them, and to to fine-tune them in the event that someone, whether it be a reporter or whether it be a salesman or whether it be somebody, anybody disturbing the tenants' quiet enjoyment, that we have a policy that's effective and that can protect the tenants. My motion was to protect the tenants. That's one of the jobs we have here. A lot of things seems to have gotten lost in the shuffle, and we got to remember that the reason we're here is to provide safe, habitable premises for the tenants to live and enjoy in peace and to be able to feel safe in their homes. So, like, if it got lost, I mean, there's a lot of things. I know I see Councilor Elliott here again. I wasn't trying to shut Councilor Elliott off from the discussion. He came here looking to find out answers to a motion he filed on the City Council floor. Again, all I was looking for at that point was that we maintain order to avoid further confusion. There is a policy, Robert's Rules of Order, which I know he's familiar with. You can't just stand up in the middle of the meeting and say, I want to speak. And again, I tried to clarify as to what would have been needed at the point in time, a suspension of the rules perhaps, things like that to let them speak. Clearly, we're not going to keep someone from speaking. We're not going to not listen to people. That's ridiculous. That's never been our policy. That's never been our way of operating. So this is my motion. This is what I had written down on the piece of paper that I was reading from that night. My notes from that night. This is what the gist of it is, and that's what it is. There's nothing illegal about it. There's no banning of anybody. So I think things got blown a little bit out of proportion. And again, I said I think that in the interest of protecting the tenants, that we should. I'm pretty sure Mr. Moran, who's here today, understands that we were upset with what he did. But I personally was upset with what I read in these papers. So my motion was to protect the tenants, and again, and move on from here. Thank you.
Any other discussion, Mr. Lynn? tenants as we speak right now, as far as, let's say, salesmen, no solicitations. Is that an edict that, is it something that's in writing? Is it posted out there?
We don't have a formal or a general policy. Each property has kind of its own set of entrances and exits that are some easier to defend and control than others. We have no trespassing signs posted on a lot of our properties. The public can't just come on and park in our parking lots. That's a sign to residents only. We enforce that through stickers, card keys, and needing to get into certain buildings. So each building, each property is a little bit different and unique.
Have we had any problems, Gary, with no soliciting, with either, like election time or any, like if someone's selling land in Florida or something like that?
No, I mean, occasionally over the years, Commissioner, people would get access into our hallways and then, do something illegal in the hallways, or maybe even just sleep in the hallways. And that's usually dealt with. Simply the tenant resident sees that, either calls us if it's during the day hours, or calls the police department directly to enforce it.
So it's not a problem? Yeah.
Not generally, no.
Okay, thank you.
As Commissioner, I felt it entirely appropriate, given the circumstances, to communicate to the Lowell Sun our displeasure with the reporter's techniques in negating of access to a secure LHA facility in the use of 9 and 12-year-old children as interpreters for an LHA resident who had a limited grasp of the English language. This interaction resulted in undue stress on this LHA family. Despite the fact that the local newspaper had a signed affidavit from the mother of the 9 and 12-year-old children relaying her concerns about her interactions with their reporter, it was a disappointment that the reporting that came out of our last meeting was not reported in the proper context. The motion that was passed was not intended in any way to ban reporting of LHA activity. Our policies nonetheless should not be administered, nor appear to be administered arbitrarily. So, I know we can't offer any amendments, but I do plan on putting a motion on our next meeting's agenda to address the overriding policy and how we address no solicitation, no trespassing on all of our properties, so that it's consistent, it's not arbitrary, and the same consequences that is assigned to everyone.
Any other discussion?